October 1940, Warsaw, Poland. The bitter cold air bites softly under a grey iron sky. Snowflakes drift slowly, blanketing the cracked cobblestones and the thin roofs of the Jewish orphanage on Grodzka Street. Inside the freezing rooms, faint candlelight flickers against pale faces, trembling hands clutching thin blankets. The distant echo of marching boots, harsh and unyielding, breaks the brittle silence. Little Janek, only 7 years old, presses a trembling palm against the frosted window, his breath fogging the glass. Outside, the world has become unrecognizable. Smoke from distant fires hung heavy, covering the city in a choking veil. War, once an abstract terror, has now pierced the fragile walls of their sanctuary. If stories like this move you as deeply as they move me, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. These forgotten stories deserve to live again, and your voice helps make that happen. Before the war's grim tide swallowed Warsaw whole, Janusz Korczak was not just the director of this orphanage, but its heart and soul. A doctor, a writer, an advocate for the innocent, Korczak believed deeply in the rights and dignity of children, even when the world seemed bent on crushing their spirits. This orphanage was no mere refuge. It was a republic run by children, governed by their own laws and councils, where voices small but fierce echoed against the encroaching darkness. Life before war was marked by routine tenderness. Children learned, played, debated in their parliament. Korczak nurtured their will to hope as fiercely as one might tend a fragile flame. Yet beneath this fragile peace, ominous whispers grew louder. The encroaching storm of hatred and violence was about to rend everything apart. War came not with the clash of arms alone, but with gnawing hunger, creeping sickness, and endless nights of fear. The Warsaw Ghetto, sealed in autumn 1940, enclosed over 400,000 Jews in a suffocating wall of despair. Cold hunger and death stalked its narrow streets. Soldiers in steel helmets barked orders and dragged families from their homes. Food became a scarce treasure, shared sparingly among shivering children whose laughter faded like a dying ember. In this impossible place, Janusz Korczak's resolve became an act of rebellion. When Nazis ordered the orphanage's liquidation in 1942, Korczak refused to abandon the children under his care. Offered false papers and escape, he declined, choosing instead to walk with his small parliament to the final journey, to the death camp of Treblinka. His courage was not a shout but a whispered promise. None would face the end alone. The historical context is stark and brutal. Germany invaded Poland in 1939, and by November 1940, the Warsaw Ghetto was a cage, surrounded by barbed wire and guarded by armed SS troops. The Orphan's Republic, within this prison, was an anomalous beacon of childhood's resilience. Around them, hunger and disease killed tens of thousands. Deportations began in summer 1942, trains hauling hundreds of thousands to extermination camps. The turning point came early August 1942. Nazi officers stormed the orphanage. Korczak gathered his children, his staff, and stepped onto the streets for the last time. The children walked tightly in rows through packed, desolate ghetto alleys. Korczak's calm presence overshadowed despair's grip. For them, he was a shield as they boarded cattle cars to Treblinka. The act's consequence was tragic yet immortal. The children and Korczak were murdered almost immediately upon arrival. Yet their legacy, the invisible parliament of orphans, the compassion amid destruction, survived in memories and hidden records. This story, smothered by silence and shattered documents, was rediscovered decades later by historians piecing together testimonies and archives, restoring light to these lost lives. Now, as we close, we reflect on the fragile courage of those children and their guardian. In a world torn by war and hatred, it was not weapons but humanity that forged resistance. Their small acts, born of love and defiance, remind us that courage is found most profoundly in the stillness between fear and hope. What acts of kindness or bravery can you carry forward from these shadows of history? In remembering them, we honor the countless quietly heroic lives that shaped our world. October 1940, Warsaw, Poland. The cold wind carries an icy bite that pierces the bones, chilling even the small crowded rooms of the Jewish orphanage on Grodzka Street. Inside, dim light dapples peeling walls. The soft murmur of children, once filled with innocent laughter, now whispers through the corridors. Outside, steel-helmeted soldiers march by, the heavy thud of their boots echoing in the narrow streets, lined with snow-laden rooftops, the city's heart now a cage. Janusz Korczak, the devoted physician and soul of this fragile haven for orphans, watches silently from the attic window, his hands trembling not from cold but from the weight of history closing in. If stories like this move you as deeply as they move me, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. These forgotten stories deserve to live again, and your voice helps make that happen. Before the storm, Korczak was more than an orphanage director. He was a beacon of hope and advocacy for children's rights, a man who saw value in the smallest and weakest. His Dom Siero, House of Orphans, was a sanctuary, not only shelter but a republic run by children themselves. They held elections, wrote their own laws, and conducted councils. In a Warsaw alive with humdrum moments of peace, these children had the rare gift of agency. Their daily lives were full of routines characterized by simplicity and joy, lessons, games, storytelling, music. Yet beneath it all lurked a sense of foreboding. The tension of war's encroachment was more than just headlines. It was in every hastened footstep outside, every whispered word, every guarded glance. October 12, 1940, Germany's segregation order forced every Jewish family, every orphan, every dreamer into the confined walls of the Warsaw Ghetto. The city's Jewish population, over 400,000 strong, was compressed into a mere 3.4 square kilometers, encircled by barbed wire and guarded by armed troops. Dom Siero was uprooted, moving twice within the worsening conditions, from Krokmalna Street to Chłodna, and finally to Siena and Śliska streets inside the ghetto. As the ghetto's walls closed tighter, hunger gnawed relentlessly. Bread was currency, death was constant. Starvation, typhus outbreaks, despair. The orphanage sheltered not only the bodies, but the fragile flicker of childhood itself. Soldiers, armed with cruelty, patrolled with orders to confiscate, to kill, to control. It was a world where hope seemed foolish, yet Korczak's defiance shone quietly. Offered a chance to escape, to live on the Aryan side away from death's shadow, he refused. His children came first, and his refusal was a moral beacon wrapped in love and sacrifice. He begged for food, took care of the sick, ensured lessons and governance continued, as feasible under the crushing weight of terror. The children were more than wards. They were parliamentarians in their own republic. Bonds formed in this crucible of survival knitted them as family, with Korczak as their stalwart guardian. The ghetto's horrors amplified every sensation. The bitter cold, the smell of burning wood and rotting garbage, the ceased laughter now replaced with silence, punctuated by distant sirens. By 1942, the Nazis escalated their genocidal final solution. The summer saw the start of deportations, the ruthless clearing of the ghetto. Early August brought the heart-wrenching climax. On the 5th or 6th, German forces arrived at Dom Siero's door to round up nearly 200 orphans and their guardians for transfer to the Treblinka extermination camp. Korczak, seriously ill but undeterred, refused to abandon his charges. He marched with them in a procession of fragile hope and quiet resistance. The children wore their best clothes, their pale faces stoic. They carried a small flag, their symbol of unity even as the road led to certain death. Their slow procession wound through empty streets scarred by war, cracked pavements, broken windows, barbed wire fences. Witnesses recall Korczak's calm voice, his presence a shield as they approached the Umschlagplatz station. The march was a defiance of despair, but the destination was merciless. Hours later, the orphans, Korczak and his staff perished in gas chambers at Treblinka. Yet their story was not erased by death. For decades, this silent republic of children and their tireless guardian was lost to time, buried beneath ash, fear, and destroyed records. Survivor testimonies, smuggled diaries, and historical excavations slowly resurrected their memory. Korczak's diary, rescued and preserved, remains a haunting testament to resilience. It is a difficult thing to be born and to live. Today, monuments stand in Warsaw to honor Janusz Korczak and his children, reminding us that courage flourishes not only through weapons, but also through compassion, tenacity, and the refusal to surrender humanity in the depths of horror. Reflecting on their journey, we understand that the smallest acts, holding a child's hand, writing laws for a forgotten republic, sharing a crumb of bread, resonate through history. In these acts lie the true power of resistance, the silent fight for dignity, and the eternal echo of hope. What courage lies within you to carry their legacy forward? Every voice counts, every story endures. October 1912. Amid Warsaw's bustling streets, the newly built Dom Siero orphanage opened its doors for the first time. Conceived by the Help for Orphans Society and designed by architect Henrik Stiefelmann, this four-story building stood as a modern sanctuary for Jewish orphans. Polish Jewish pediatrician and visionary educator Janusz Korczak, known then as Henryk Goldschmidt, stepped forward as its director. Alongside Stefania Wilczynska, the head educator and his steadfast partner in care, he welcomed the first 85 children into a space that was more than shelter. It was an incubator of hope and dignity. Korczak's vision was revolutionary. Children were not subjects of charity, but citizens with rights and responsibilities. He instituted a children's republic within, where they held elections, convened their own parliament, and published their own newspaper, the Mały Przegląd, the Little Review. These children learned early that even in hardship, their voices mattered. They debated, judged, enacted rules that governed the small world of the orphanage. This experiment in childhood self-government was a beacon of light amid a Poland that was yet to fully embrace such ideals. The orphanage bustled with life. The echoes of children's laughter mingled with lessons and crafts. Each day was a dance of routine and discovery. Korczak lived modestly in the attic, his room hidden behind a characteristic mansard window, close enough to hear the breath and heartbeat of the children whose lives he had vowed to nurture. His tireless energy and insistence on respect for each child's dignity created a home where love mingled with discipline, dreams with reality. War altered this sanctuary forever. In 1939, the drums of conflict pounded louder as Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Warsaw's streets, once dappled with snow and song, darkened with smoke and fear. Janusz Korczak volunteered for the Polish army, but age barred him from service. Instead, he returned to his charges, who would come to depend on him not only as a doctor or teacher, but as a guardian in an unraveling world. By autumn 1940, the war's iron grip tightened. The Warsaw Ghetto was sealed, corralling over 400,000 Jewish residents, including the orphanage's children, into a walled prison. Dom Siero was forcibly moved twice to smaller, harsher quarters within the ghetto's shrinking area, first to Kładno Street, then Siena Street, each relocation a loss of comfort, choice, and hope. Inside the ghetto, conditions degenerated rapidly. Hunger clawed with relentless teeth at stomachs already hollowed by fear. Disease spread through crowded rooms, and death was an omnipresent visitor in the frozen air. Yet inside this swirling nightmare, Korczak's orphan republic endured. Laws were still debated. Children protected each other with fierce loyalty. The newspaper was printed in secret. Even amid squalor, Korczak insisted on education, play, and the small dignity of childhood routine. The children were no longer only orphans. They were survivors in a condemned city. Korczak's health deteriorated under stress, yet his spirit remained unyielded. He refused a chance to escape the ghetto's death sentence. His loyalty to his children was absolute. In August 1942, the nightmare climaxed. Nazi forces arrived to liquidate the orphanage, to transport Korczak and nearly 200 children between 7 and 17 years old to Treblinka. Despite his failing heart, Korczak led his charges with quiet courage. Dressed in their best clothes, walking four abreast through the desolate streets, the children carried a small flag representing their lost republic, a final act of defiant dignity. As they approached Umschlagplatz, the departure point, onlookers witnessed a procession heavy with sorrow but radiating immense courage. Korczak moved among the children, offering small comforts, calming fears, embodying the humanity that the war sought to extinguish. The train to Treblinka carried them away from Warsaw, but not from memory. Within hours of arrival, they were murdered in gas chambers. Korczak's choice to stay was an ultimate act of compassion, a testament to the profound power of love amid unimaginable horror. After the war, the story of the orphan parliament was almost lost. Documents were destroyed, witnesses silenced, memories buried beneath ash and silence. Yet decades later, archives, testimonials, and the precious fragments of Korczak's diary were unearthed, allowing the world to hear again the voices of those children and their guardian. The orphanage building on Krochmalna Street remains a symbol, a somber monument to innocence stolen but never forgotten. Monuments and memorials in Warsaw and beyond commemorate Janusz Korczak and his children, preserving their legacy. Their story teaches us that courage is not measured by weapons or ranks, but by the will to protect, to love, to resist with compassion. The smallest acts of kindness can ripple through history, and forgotten people shape the world's soul. What lessons do we carry from this forgotten parliament of children? How do we honor those who govern themselves with justice and hope in a time ruled by cruelty and death? October 5th, 1942. The grey sky hangs heavy over Warsaw's crumbling streets. Within the cramped orphanage at 16 Siena Street, nearly 200 children gather quietly. They wear their best clothes, faded but carefully ironed, clutching a small flag that symbolizes their fleeting republic, their collective voice. Janusz Korczak, now frail from heart disease and the unimaginable burdens he carries, moves among them with a resolute calm. Stefania Wilczynska walks close by his side, her face a mask of quiet strength. Outside, the cold air carries the distant rumble of heavy boots and barking orders. The dreaded moment of departure has arrived. Korczak's orphans, who have lived and governed as a small community within this suffocating ghetto, now face the ultimate journey, a march to the Umschlagplatz, the train station that leads to the death camp of Treblinka. As the children fall into orderly rows of 4, their footsteps crunching softly on the frost-bitten cobblestones, neighbors peek from behind cracked windows. Some silently wipe tears away. Others avert their eyes in the unbearable sorrow of witnessing this parade of innocence condemned. Korczak walks amongst them, offering gentle words of assurance, smoothing a frightened brow, holding the hands of trembling children. He refuses entreaties to save himself, rejecting offers of false refuge outside the ghetto. His commitment is absolute, to accompany these children through death or survival, never to abandon them. The march weaves through silent streets emptied by fear and war. The Children's Parliament, once filled with laughter, debate and lawmaking, is now a symbol of fragile human dignity confronting horrific fate. At the Umschlagplatz station, the children are loaded with the grim efficiency of death machinery into cattle cars that will carry them away from Warsaw's walls, from life itself. While the train roars towards Treblinka, Korczak's final diary entries reveal his unshakable belief in the resilience of the human spirit, despite unfathomable cruelty. It is a difficult thing to be born and learn to live. In the gas chambers of Treblinka, their lives are extinguished within hours, leaving behind a memory almost erased by the rush of history, but preserved through fragments. Diaries smuggled from the ghetto, eyewitness testimonies, and the enduring spirit of Korczak's Children's Republic. The orphanage building on Krochmalna Street, spared destruction during the war, stands today as a somber monument. Korczak's room in the attic, once his refuge among children, was lost to time, yet the ideals he lived by remain immortal. The story of the Orphan Parliament calls us to remember, courage is not the grand gesture of weapons, but the resolute, tender actions of love, the small acts of defiance against death itself. Despite the darkness of their time, these children governed themselves with dignity and hope. They remind us that even when swallowed by war's brutality, humanity can find voice and agency in the most unlikely places. This legacy teaches a universal truth, that every story, no matter how forgotten, shapes the human journey. Every silent act of courage, every small hand held, pulses through history's veins. What quiet courage calls to you in this moment? How do you carry their story forward in your own life?